Breath of the Wild changed a lot about the Zelda formula, making everything as open as possible. No longer do you need a hookshot to get past a long canyon. All you need is magic bombs, a paraglider, and a whole lot of free time. And this continues into Tears of the Kingdom, minus the magic bombs. But from the moment you leave the tutorial, you can go anywhere and fight anything. And it's not even going to be a challenge. But why? Breath of the Wild introduced a leveling system to Zelda, where enemies scale in power the more are defeated, or when specific triggers are hit. I can't fully explain it since there's a lot of small details, but as it goes, most enemies start at their lowest power, red. And once you defeat, let's suppose, 10 bokoblins and moblins, all the red enemies scale up to blue, with more health and dealing more damage. This scales further to black and silver enemies as well. The more you play the game, the better the enemies get. But since your experience in the game and weapons usually scale at the same speed, although aren't directly tied to enemy scaling, the game doesn't get any harder. In the beginning, you're fighting a 70 health enemy with a 5 damage weapon, and by the end of the game, you're fighting a 700 health enemy with a 50 damage weapon. Nothing really changes. It's all a matter of scale. This isn't fun. There's a few enemies that are excluded from the levels or start harder with camps of silver and black enemies next to the regular red, but usually everything grows as you do. The way the current system works is that you will always remain relatively evenly matched to all enemies, with the only exception being that you have to spend a bit more effort finding a good weapon over stealing the closest tree branch. But now, in Tears of the Kingdom, that's not even true. So here, before I say what they need to do to fix it, I should say that in the case of Breath of the Wild, this wasn't the worst mechanic to have, because this game has exploration at the forefront. If your main intention while playing the game is to explore, you shouldn't have to worry about hiding from or fighting overly difficult enemies. However, in the case of Tears of the Kingdom, we're returning to a world we've already explored, and while we got new ways to traverse it and there's a few select areas that are completely new, most of the world is in fact the same as Breath of the Wild, so in my eyes, we shouldn't be exclusively focusing on the exploration part, unless it was a completely new world. Tears of the Kingdom should be about overcoming evil, an evil which remains easy. So then, what exactly do I propose would fix this issue? The main problem right now is that you can go anywhere and fight anything, and it'll all be relatively easy, unless you're going to a specifically difficult area. This is necessary for the open world aspects of this game, but it drags down the possibility of coming across truly difficult sections. My suggestion is to essentially remove this entire mechanic. The best part about these two games is that you can do anything at any time, and I don't want to remove that, but I think some areas need to be more difficult. Much like Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West, and probably any other open world game out there. I think there needs to be sections of the map with harder enemies and sections of the map with easy enemies, and they should remain at the same strength the entire game. Having it this way allows for there to be an intended pathway for everyone to follow. But if you decide to go a different way, you're perfectly free to do so, with the cost of harder encounters. This also allows the game to scale in difficulty without scaling in your own power, so you can be super strong against early game enemies and weak against late game enemies, until, at last, you're late game and can destroy everyone. The cost with this is that it encourages a strict pathway, making so it's inherently less open world than it would be otherwise. At the very least, it encourages you to find better ways to fight enemies if you do intend to go off the beaten path. Now, like I said, there absolutely does exist challenging sections within the base game already. For example, Akala Citadel Ruins with all the Guardian Skywatchers, or the Forgotten Temple with its Guardians. Others exist in slightly more unique ways, but the common thread here is the lack of uniqueness. No matter where you go, you will always find bokoblins and moblins with a secondary team of Lizalfos, and if you're lucky, a Guardian to spice things up. And that's another part of Breath of the Wild's and Tears of the Kingdom's combat that upsets me. Everything is the same. No matter where you are in the game, all you will find is bokoblins, moblins, and Lizalfos. In the desert, you get sandy electric Lizalfos. In the mountains, snowy ice. And in Elden, you get rocky fire Lizalfos. It's slight variations, but it's all the same enemy. As I played Tears of the Kingdom, going through the depths for the first time gave me so much excitement as I stumbled across new enemies like the Little Frogs and Goliath Frogs. Now, I can't be too nice with the depths since it has its own issue in variety, but each time I found one of the new enemies in Tears of the Kingdom, it was so exciting because most of them got their own little section of the world they were unique to. If you're walking down the fields of Hyrule, you won't just find a battalion of Horriblin, you actually have to go and find them in their designated caves. And this type of world building is something that these games desperately need. Think about how much more interesting the game would be if each region actually had their own enemies instead of the same rotation of Moblins and Lizalfos. I could live with having a few enemies constant throughout the world, such as Bokoblins, so long as I can find new enemies elsewhere. I love the desert in Tears of the Kingdom because we have the Gyptos. Now imagine if the cold regions such as Hebra and Mount Lanayru had Wolfos and Poes. Meanwhile, Death Mountain could have Dodongos, Magtails, and Akaman, with Hyrule Field featuring Peahats and various Deku enemies. These enemies don't even have to be references to past games, although many should. We just need variation within the world. One of the most disappointing quests in Tears of the Kingdom could have been fixed with only a bit more diversity. At Lurelin Village, you're quested to deal with pirates on Eventide Island. Going into this, I was super excited. Maybe there's a faction of evil Gerudos after the return of Ganondorf. Perhaps Mini Blin of Wind Waker returning too. Ooh, maybe a completely new enemy. Well, I should have guessed that it would have just been Bokoblins again. The worst part is that they didn't even bother to wear pirate hats. So much of this game would benefit if only given the opportunity to stand out. So from this video, my only hope is that with the coming Zelda games, they continue to break conventions of Zelda. And that includes having the exact same enemies at every part of the game. I want new enemies. I want old enemies. I just don't want to see them everywhere I go. But if you have any suggestions, let me know. Make sure to floss after every meal, and as always, keep cool.
Bye!